All right, thank you. We are now in session, bang, bang. I call to order the September 14th, 2020 meeting of the Metro Human Relations Commission. We need, the chair detects a quorum. We need a motion to have this meeting, conduct this meeting electronically. Is there such a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the items on the meeting agenda constitute essential business of this board. Meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans, considering the COVID-19 outbreak, and any rule that conflicts with Governor's Executive Order 16 permitting electronic meetings be suspended.
Thank you. Is there a second? No, I heard a second. It sounded like Jeremy's voice. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. Approve the minutes. The minutes were sent a couple days ago by Barbara. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to see them. We'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Also move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, any amendments, any corrections anyone wishes to make?
I'm sorry, was that Jeremy who seconded?
It was Pratik Dash.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Any corrections, any amendments? Seeing none, I guess we're ready to vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, it's signified by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Well, I guess I should have asked for abstentions. Okay, no abstention. All right, the financial update, I will turn it over to our executive director.
Thank you, Chair Richmond. Last month, we started a conversation about the overall budget and the things that we normally spend our money on in the office when there isn't a global pandemic. And if you will recall, we had a document from last month, which was a budget breakdown that sort of represented where our funds are spent. And I sent a link to that. It is also available for the public on our website. And, the vast majority of our budget, which our budget is $510,000, the vast majority is fixed cost, salaries, benefits, our rent, and the services that we receive from IT. We have some other miscellaneous internal costs, mileage, parking. We have some cell phone reimbursement for our staff. It's a modest amount, but all of us end up using our cell phones for a significant amount of commission work. And we do not have Metro-owned cell phones. We are using our own cell phones for that purpose. And you all have supported my maintaining my law license, so there's some modest costs with that, and just some other in-office things. We, even pre-COVID, we didn't have a coffee service or other significant costs for in our office. So it was mostly copies, and there is a water filter that we maintain in this service. So the upshot is, we have a modest amount of money, usually around $55,000 to spend like discretionary spending to support our programming, our workshops, small honorariums to interns or community partners who invest a significant time in the work that we're doing. But I think that this year, given the number of like in-person festivals and in-person events that we might normally support, we're not going to be investing in that way. So I did want to hear from you all just a little guidance on what you thought was important. And as I'm thinking through where we can best invest those funds, I did want to give you all an opportunity to, to give me some guidance. So I guess I will start by saying, like, are there questions? Had you and I to think about this over the last month? I'd be happy to hear your questions or hear your ideas.
Hey, Mel. While I did think about it, I also think there's a larger issue of us thinking about how do we increase the budget based on the limited amount of people you have to do various things, particularly along the lines of research and stuff like that. I don't know, how would we best go about, and I understand all the COVID stuff, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least start coming up with a strategy to ultimately try to increase your budget. But as I look at it, you don't have much to move around in very many areas. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Mel, also kind of related to what Commissioner Tucker just mentioned. Aren't we losing Sarah? Has she already left? Because then that would put us in an even tighter position if we're down to just 3 staff members.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. Sarah Imran, who has been serving as our director of policy and research, and who has been a real joy in the office. We do anticipate that she will be leaving. We've had the opportunity actually to retain her services and keep her deeply engaged in what we're doing because we're all working from home. But, at the point where Nashville has reached a phase where it's safe for us to engaging in our work in person, I think at that point, Sarah is likely to, she's going to resign. But the hiring freeze was lifted. So at that point, we will be able to hire a new policy and research director. And Tucker, to Commissioner Tucker, to your point, more broadly, in the 5 years that I have been your director, we have requested additional funds, for the most part, for additional staff member. You know, as the number of constituents in Nashville grow, and you know, the number of services that were requested from other countywide, it is really difficult to meet the demand. And quite frankly, where we're at right now, $0.04 that hold on, let me stop my video because can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Well, sorry if I'm repeating myself for the third time, but yeah, we're only at like 73 or 74 cents per capita for the services that we provide, and that includes all of our fixed costs. Meaning, Nashvillians pay 74 cents per for the services that we provide. So, you know, we have made the argument over the last years that the service that we provide we really do need another staff member, and I will continue on that path. But you're right, like this is something that's going to require advocacy from the board itself. Other questions, comments?
So, I mean, what flexibility do we have with respect to allocating funds within the budget?
So other than the fixed costs, we have complete flexibility for allocation. So that, you know, 55 to, you know, $70,000 for programming, we can direct where that goes.
Because, I mean, you know, again, one of our agenda items today and one of our priorities has been addressing how to incorporate equity lens analysis into Metro budget. And to the extent that that will require, could require some expert sources outside of Metro, I'd like us to consider allocating funds in that direction.
Yes, and thank you. I appreciate that perspective. I have felt that one of the best ways to spend some of our discretionary funding is for outside expertise on research or policy recommendations or implementing your policy recommendations in some ways to make up for the dearth of human resources that we have within our own office.
Does anyone have any other comments or questions on this?
Sorry, this is Miriam. The only other thing that comes to mind is, and I'm guessing it's not a big thing, but since we're I think we're set up to address issues of equity and exclusion within Metro and Nashville, and I was just wondering, is there a way, do we need to think about when citizens bring up issues to us and need those to be addressed? Do we need to, Mel, this is just asking you, do we need to allocate resources in that direction, like the COB kind of does, or how do you see that in terms of the relative weight of like all that the Human Relations Commission, of things that the commission has to do?
So before I answer, let me remind everybody to please mute themselves when they're not talking because it creates background noise, so I can't hear your co-commissioners. But if I heard you right, Miriam, so yeah, when people bring issues to us or when there are issues that are within our purview and that you all act on independently, the real question is like, what financial resources do those require? And in large part, there aren't a great number of there's not a lot of opportunities where I say, well, had we more financial resources to invest, it would be different, except for human resources, right? Human beings to coordinate hearings and even setting up the monthly meeting for this takes a lot of human resources and coordination. And so for the most part, that's where I think we have the most, that's where our biggest challenge is. Now, as to like what I'd be interested to hear from you, if you've looked at what the Community Oversight Board is doing with their additional resources, which are significantly more than we have. But if there's a lesson to be learned there, I'd love to hear what your suggestion is.
No. I mean, I just was trying to figure out in my own mind what is our appropriate response and are we doing that? And it sounds like you're saying we kind of are, and it doesn't cost a lot. So I was just thinking, do we need expertise in certain areas, in-house expertise on certain things? But y'all are just figuring it out based on what comes up. So that's fine. I think back to that woman that came to our meeting talking about housing, and the woman that got in touch with me, talking her brother that was in prison and might have COVID, just these different experiences of like, do we feel like we responded to these, and is it a resource issue, I guess?
Of course, one issue that was brought to me had to do with the fairground shelter and the mistreatment of a person there. And so our response was simply Mel was already writing a letter, I guess, to the mayor's office. And so we just added that complaint to a series of other issues that we were raising. And so adding an additional sentence or a paragraph to that letter I'm assuming didn't cost anything except, a couple of keystrokes. So some things, can be done fairly quickly and easily, did not require a great deal of staff time, did not cost any money, resources, human or financial resources in that way. So there are times we can do it fairly quickly and easily and cheaply. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, and I think that actually, the next piece on the agenda is talking about the metrics that we are tracking and reporting monthly to the mayor's office, or the Office of Performance Management. I think will help you all sort of understand like what kinds of demands or requests that that your staff and you all are responding to, and so I'm really actually thankful to have the opportunity to track these metrics. While I have always since I started, I have certainly been tracking, how many events we do, how many educational programs, and a rough estimate of how many constituents we've engaged. What I wasn't doing was tracking, how many individual requests for services do we get in a month. And so we started tracking that as part of the performance metrics plan. And it hasn't been that long, so I don't want to suggest that these are numbers that represent an average month. But generally speaking, in the few months that we have been tracking, our office receives around 35 to 45 requests for services between all of us staff. And that could be a request for a training or for sponsorship or a complaint of discrimination or a referral or, request to participate in some form of community engagement. And I include in that calls from you individual commissioners, right? If you contact me to and generally speaking, from that, we are giving, 10 to 20 referrals to third parties when services are requested. That doesn't necessarily indicate that we were not able to provide direct assistance to the constituent, because sometimes what people are calling for, their request is for a referral. So, but that, that's pretty consistent from month to month. And unless it's a request for a sponsorship, a financial sponsorship, most of those requests don't include a financial commitment, but rather, staff time.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Should we move on to the performance metrics? If there's nothing else. I'm not seeing or hearing anyone, so let's go on to the performance metrics. Whatever you want to say about that.
Well, I just did want to say that, in addition to the, 35 to 45 requests for services that we receive, even during this period, this COVID period, and us working remotely, we have I'm really proud to say that we have been able to keep up a pretty good pace of providing meaningful services. We are generally doing anywhere from 2 to 5 substantive trainings, workshops, or lectures that are led by our staff every month. We're doing 5 to 10 other community building events that are either directly sponsored or co-sponsored by our office, and the events that we are able to engage. Now that number has fallen some from previous years, but that is almost exclusively because the live community events that we were doing, we just can't do that right now, right? If you think about Celebrate Nashville coming up in October, where we would have anywhere from 50 to 65,000 people come through that event in a day. We just can't do that at the moment. But I am happy to say that we are, through our events, our trainings, our publications, our events, we are able to continue to engage anywhere from 700 to 2,000 constituents in a month. And there are lots of other touch points for constituents that, quite frankly, I have not been able to figure out how to count. But using the best metrics that we could come up with. So I did just want to give you guys that update.
This is Erwin Rennick. And what kind of contacts have those been over the last couple of months?
So we've, with the sort of increased interest in tackling racial disparities and the increased conversations about racial equity, we've received a lot of requests for training apps, and not some let us asking us to co-lead with partners. So we've been doing a lot of that. Then remotely, there have been some community building events. This year we co-sponsored the Stand Against Racism with the YWCA, as we normally do. And there was a pretty decent turnout remotely. We are doing this joint project with the Community Oversight Board to hear from constituents about community and public safety, which we will talk about later in the agenda. We're still being asked to provide guest lectures for community groups or in higher education. And I'm also, we also add things like, people who are dialing in to hear these meetings and who are then watching later on YouTube, and the number of people who open our newsletters on, right? So when you add those all together, we're anywhere from 700 to 2,000 in a month.
Thank you.
Now, I will say that does not include engagements were things that you yourselves might be doing and saying, I'm here with my MHRC hat on. So I think that I would be very interested in hearing from any of you, if you are at a community event or any other engagement with constituents where you're sort of wearing your MHRC hat. I would love to be able to gather those metrics from you. Any other questions about the metrics? Okay, well, Marissa, hearing none, I think we go to the next agenda.
Okay, let's see, old business, the roadmap for selecting the new chief of police, which includes our 2 community safety town halls that we've held so far. Did you want me to start or you want to start?
Yeah, I would, because you have been involved, I would love to start and give your impressions, and I can come in and, speaking of metrics, I can give you some metrics around those meetings.
Okay, well, for those of you who have not been listening, the last 2 Mondays, we've held these 2 community safety town halls, co-chaired by me and the chair of the Community Oversight Board. We collected a number of comments from all over Davidson County. So the first one, we had 14 comments. Some called in live on the phone. Others submitted them online or recorded the 24/7 voicemail line. And then we had about 20. I didn't get the exact count for the second one last week. So we've had a total of over 30 comments, or about 30 so far between the 2. The general tone, people want the new police chief to work with the community oversight board. They were almost all consistent on that. Several did raise the issue of the sexual harassment complaint that came up. There were a handful of people who felt that the search should go outside of MNPD, that interim Chief Drake is part of this culture, although I think the majority of people seem to support him. Obviously, they want more transparency from the new chief, whoever that person is. They want the chief to work not just with COB, but with community groups in general. I'm trying to think what else sort of struck me as I was listening to all the comments. I did see that the mayor's having a meeting this week. I don't know how much of our comments have been forwarded so far to the mayor's office. I know COB is involved in this other committee that the mayor created, although we're not directly involved. But I hope that these comments that are being collected are going through. I will note that we did have one technical issue. The users of T-Mobile, and which of course is taken over Sprint, were unable to call into the live call, at least on the second call. I don't know if they had a technical problem on the first one, but we did see that problem in the second one. But again, T-Mobile users were still able to call the voicemail and again could still submit their comments.
They actually were not.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'll give you an update on that for the next one.
Okay. Well, anyway, so that's sort of my assessment. At least what pops into my head immediately. I don't know if anyone had any other questions. I did, by the way, I did notice one person called in twice, once on each of the calls. One woman I happen to know personally. who's been particularly involved in the issue of sexual harassment. And she's been an activist up at the state legislature on that particular issue and in the community as a whole. So, so there was one duplicate caller. So just noted that.
Hi, this is Lethea. I was able to call in on one of the calls, and I thought that, engagement was great. It was a substantial way for the community to feel they had a part in the conversation and to, be heard by the community. And it also increased awareness of the commission and what we do. So I thought it was very well done.
And Mel, did you say you were going to explain what was going on with T-Mobile and Sprint? Or did they attribute that to anything in particular, or do you not have specific information about that issue?
Nope, I know exactly what the deal was. And so first of all, I want to say, Commissioner Mann, thank you so much for your comment. It was it was technologically challenging. So I really appreciate your kind words.
I went on a lot of calls, and most of them have challenges. Everyone understands this is new technology for a lot of people, and even on the person trying to call in, they understand the challenges. So it'll get better, and people are a little bit understanding, given this environment, that this is all new technology.
Yes, I agree. And I really appreciate that we are doing what we can to engage the community with what we have and, being safe. But, the work doesn't end. So, so we're all struggling through this. So, okay, so the T-Mobile situation, as some of you probably know, there's a new area code overlay for Nashville. So there's new numbers that are 629 area code. And I don't quite understand the engineering end of this, but suffice it to say that whatever engineering mess was happening at T-Mobile, if you were calling from a 615 number within the jurisdiction, for some reason you couldn't call a 629 number. And it wasn't just us, it was every single person who is hanging out in Davidson County with a 615 number trying to call a 629 number. What you would get, it would just disconnect. It would beep and disconnect. So giant kudos to not only us, but certainly to IT, who took that problem seriously, which, by the way, wasn't just a problem for us, but that was also presenting a challenge for Metro Council and for people calling in, because the new numbers that are assigned for these call-in situations are all 629 numbers. So they followed up with T-Mobile and escalated that problem and worked with them. And I'm super happy to announce that whatever T-Mobile needed to do to fix it, they have fixed it. And so they didn't fix it just for us. They fixed it for all of Nashville. So
very good.
So did a significant service this week.
Yeah. I also wanted to give kudos to the COP team in the phone bank room. I was there. I trained to field those calls as well, and we tag teamed a little bit on the first night for sure, when it was the least, where we had the greatest unknowns. We'll just put it that way. So they did a great job too. So thank you to them.
Absolutely. And thank you, Janice, for volunteering and actually showing up in person to make that happen. We really appreciate you.
Hi, it's Quibi Pretorius. I tuned in as well, and I was very impressed with the way you guys ran it and represented our commission and how you guys engaged with people. I mean, folks called in from Bellevue all the way to Mount Juliet and all over the city. And I was really impressed with the level of engagement and how much people knew. And there was that one guy who called in about the Cahoots program and from another city, and people were very interested in the in a mental health response team or a non-criminal emergency response team for the police. And so it was just very heartening to hear how interested in and engaged our fellow Nashvillians are.
Anyone else? Anyone had anything else they either wish to add or any questions anybody else have? We haven't announced, we're supposed to have 4. We haven't announced the last 2 yet.
And actually, the COB has announced that.
Okay.
This week to see if you're able to co-host those. And quite frankly, you all, I need you to dig in. I'm gonna send tomorrow by tomorrow morning a full, here's the invitation, here's all the information, and get it out to people. Because I know that people want to participate. And so we just need to let them know that this is how they can participate. And just to update the numbers, we had on our count at the final thing, we had 8, and it wasn't a significant number of callers, but I agree with what you guys are saying. These were really substantive, well thought out comments. I mean, people who are clearly paying attention and so we had 18 comments for the first night and 34 on our second night. We had 100 live viewers the second night, and it's been watched 36 times. So so people are paying attention to it. And sorry, I know I keep going out. Okay. Yes, these are our lives now. Somebody give me a thumbs up and tell me they can hear me now.
We hear you.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you. So 18 callers the first night, 34 comments the second time, 190 live viewers the first night, 108 live viewers the second night. The YouTube videos together have been watched about 100 times. So, so we're, I mean, it's a big city where, so proportionally we're not reaching a significant number, but clearly people are paying attention. And these comments are, you're absolutely right. They're from all over the city. They're from men, women. They're from, proportionally representative, Black and white, that sort of reflects the demographics of Nashville generally. But we're definitely going to need some help getting folks, particularly those who work with the immigrant community and the refugee community, and people who themselves are immigrants or refugees, to participate.
Mel, one thing I'm thinking I'm going to do is just create a couple of posts on my Instagram pages and send them directly to friends so they get kind of buzzing through Insta a little bit, because I know people that would be interested that probably just don't know because they get their information through one channel, you know? So I think I might do that, and I'll just share with you what I do.
Yeah, that would be really great. Because, you know, what I too put some stuff out on social media, and then I just did personal invitations to people in the community, and asked them the favor of, will you please send this out to your constituents? And I think that worked really well for the last one. Like I said, we had enough comments to fill the full time that, you know, that we allotted. But I also know that I got a ton of texts and emails from people saying, I can't get through, I can't get through. But that's, of course, when we found out that there was a T-Mobile problem. But so thank you very much for that offer, Miriam. And if all of you would do that, because one thing is people don't have to call in during the live event, right? They can call the recorded line and leave a comment at any time, like, you know, at their leisure.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to make a post, like a post in Canva with the important information, and put that in the status, and I'll just share it with you guys, and whoever wants to use it can use it.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I will be sure that we will give you, tomorrow we'll give you all the tools you need to make that happen.
Anything else? Anyone else have anything to add or final questions before we move on? Well, if not, then we will now move to new business, starting with the Consumer Financial Protection Initiative grant-funded fellowship.
Yes, thank you, Chair Richmond. If you'll just give me 1 second to open this document so I represent accurately. A grant that was awarded to Nashville that was to run until the end of this month. The grant was a consumer protection fellow, a position that was a 2-year funded position. The grantor was the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund, and it's called the Consumer Financial Protection Initiative. And the position had been funded for a fellow who was working in the mayor's office prior to Mayor Cooper's election. And that fellow has since left, and what that fellow had started, which, by the way, I had been working with them on this particular project. That, you know, when that fellow left, there has not been anyone working on this particular initiative. The initiative to establish or to rededicate an existing office or department focused on consumer financial protection. The fellow would dedicate at least 75% their time to this grant initiative. They were to develop a consumer outreach and education strategy, and working with key stakeholders on policy strategies, right, to help the city really consolidate and mobilize local capability to mediate complaints to protect consumers. And the mayor's office and the grantor reached out to me a few months ago to consider basically taking over the project to to complete the project. And I was definitely considering that. I checked with the funds that are remaining, and there's a healthy amount of money left in that grant. And despite the fact that it was supposed to expire at the end of this month, if we can come to an agreement on how to move the project forward, then the grantor is willing to do what they need to do to extend the grant to accommodate that. And it's about $63,000 left in that grant fund. So that could fund a full-time fellow in our office for a full year to work on that initiative. And I personally think it's a great opportunity. I think that consumer protection issues are significant in this city. When you think about things like, predatory lending and consumer protection fraud or consumer fraud, particularly in the immigrant and refugee communities. And a lot of those needs are going unmet, and there's not a lot of coordinated education for constituents on consumer protection. So I wanted to let you know that I'm in conversation with them and to get some feedback from you. I think that, to be perfectly honest, and I was honest with the grantor in this case, that but for resources to employ a dedicated fellow, it was just not something that our office was going to be able to take on. We just simply we don't have the human resources to take on another big initiative, certainly one that wasn't directed by this table. But with a fellow, I think that is something that we could accomplish. Plus, under the grant, it's 75% of their time is to work directly on the initiative, but the remainder of their time can be spent on related work within our office. So I think that can help us increase a little bit of capacity.
That's fantastic. I think that's a definite plus to be added to your human capital there.
I would agree also, but I guess I'm asking a question. Is there going to be some final report that is necessary to meet what the grantor is looking for? Because if it is, I think just looking at the way the Tennessee legislature has really been passing laws that really get right at the heart of the lack of consumer protections, even with the passage of several laws related to liability as it relates to COVID, that that issue, when you talk about it amongst all the other issues, consumer protections in Tennessee, I would think, are much less than they may be in many other states. So I think it may be a good thing.
Actually, Commissioner Tucker, that's a really great question. And I'm in my follow-up meeting with them this week. I'm going to raise that and say, right, that I've heard from the commission that like what is their comfort level on, through this initiative are highlighting the opportunities for improving policy statewide. And I think that I can't imagine that that isn't part of it, because Nashville wasn't the only city who got this grant funding. Several of the other cities in in Tennessee also received the grant funding, and they're working together. So I frankly would be quite surprised if the grantor doesn't expect that these cities working together aren't going to come together and say, here are the ways in which consumer protection could be improved statewide.
And one additional question for you, Mel, how much oversight would you have to exert in this process? I mean, is a person pretty self-regulated?
So one benefit is there is nobody in the position right now. So I would basically be doing that hire, right? I would be hiring the fellow. So anybody listening who is ever interested in the future in that fellowship position, they're going to have to be self-directed. I'm just going to let y'all know. Now, I'm, I have a law degree. I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to be interested in some of the aspects. And some oversight, but I'm definitely most interested in finding a fellow who has the capacity and self-motivation to move this forward in a year.
And when do you anticipate it being announced?
Well, there's a couple of bureaucratic hurdles. One of them is from the grantor themselves, right? That they're going to have to do what they need to do to extend the grant. And then, the grant was approved by Metro Council in 2018. And so it will likely require legislation to continue that grant. And I don't anticipate that being a problem, but it just takes time. And, Metro Council only takes up grant legislation once a month. So, it might be a month and a half, 2 months before we're in a position to actually hire somebody.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other comments or questions?
This is Commissioner Vanek. I understand the attraction of going of this grant. I just sort of have this sense that it's stretching us a little far from our mission. I was trying to think which entity in Metro is really focused on poverty reduction, on trying to assist citizens in avoiding being scammed by predatory lenders and things along those lines. It's just, I guess my concern more is that it's taking on another supervisory responsibility of our executive director for a certainly laudable project. Unfortunately, we have lots of laudable projects on our plate. So it's a good thing. I just am expressing some concern about getting a little far afield from human relations.
I guess that was the point of my question too about, how much self-direction, what would it take away from Mel's day to day? And, I do see the benefit of, the extra time that individual perhaps would be able to contribute to very mission-centric commission duties would be beneficial to her, obviously. So that's, I echo your concerns. You said it much better than I, Commissioner Vanek.
Well, and I appreciate that perspective. I do think that my goal is to be able to hire, a fellow who can be self-directed and do this work. And unfortunately for a lot of people right now, if you think about the number of law graduates who are having a hard time finding employment, and lots of other people, coming out of master's programs. And so my assessment right now is, there are a lot of really capable folks who are looking for meaningful employment, even if it's just for a year. So yeah, my goal is to let somebody run with this. And you're right, I don't have time to micromanage this project or this fellow any more than I do my other staff.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on? Well then, hearing none, we'll then go to the cohort, equity lens.
Okay, great. Just give me another moment to pull up the appropriate document. Okay, so on this, it's related to the equity lens work that we have started together, and the policy recommendation that this body made related to the implementation of an equity lens in our budgeting process and in our performance management. The Urban Institute has an upward mobility cohort RFI request for information out, inviting counties to apply to be a part of an probably 8-county cohort nationally to work with the Urban Institute, who will provide technical assistance to work with county staff and cross-sector leaders, right, to examine how the county's mobility metrics compare with other jurisdictions, and what kind of, to analyze mobility metrics and data to better understand racial and ethnic disparities and help to target strategies, and to develop a mobility action plan to identify key challenges across policy areas. And really, I was really impressed with their approach to social mobility and equity, and what they are asking counties to do, and the kind of technical support they want to provide to counties who commit to a equity and social mobility plan. And so I was contacted by social services, in particular Garrett Harper and Abdelghani Barre. They are the smart folks at social services who draft the why am I blanking? I look at it all the time. The community needs assessment. And so they're, with blessing from the mayor's office, are applying to be a part of this cohort. And the call was to ask if we would partner with them on that. And in particular, they had significant interest in the equity lens. I've been working with Abdelghani and Garrett for a while now on different anti-poverty stuff, and both of them have really paid attention to the policy recommendations we've made. They've attended workshops that I've given to talk about what an equity lens is, and so they were working together to make the building and implementing an equity lens a significant part of the application that we're giving to the Urban Institute for this cohort opportunity. And the application is due in 2 days. And I'm really excited about it. If Nashville, Davidson County's accepted in that cohort, then we would potentially have real technical support from the Urban Institute to build and push for the implementation of an equity lens. Comments, concerns?
Well, Mel, this is David. I am definitely in favor of the equity lens. And I think even more so now that particularly with all that's going on socially, that this may be a good time for us, even as a commission, to bring that up again. So even while we wait on the Urban Institute, we might need to develop some kind of ways of just as a commission to begin talking more about that as a way that in moving forward with policies, even in rebuilding this economy after COVID, the disbursement of even the COVID related funds that are here. The 120 million in funds, they allocated 10 million toward rent, mortgage, and utilities. They being the city, made the United Way the gatekeeper. So they were going to do these smaller grants with organizations to actually do that. As of last week, they had only let out to these organizations $4 million. Well, there's a November 15th deadline as it relates to these funds where they're going to take them back. So my question, well, I guess my statement of even saying all this is, we know that there are people who have been adversely affected by COVID who need help with rent, mortgage, and utilities. And there is $6 million that we're struggling to find a way to get that to the people who actually need that. And I say that part of that problem is because we don't look at certain things through a equity lens, through a way of how do the people who need the most help get the most help. So if that money happens to go back to the government, I think that would be an extreme loss. But how do we help Metro? How do we help our city see that there's another way of looking at how we deploy the resources that we do have? So I'm backing you 100% on that.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Tucker. And let me just also add, there was in the news yesterday, WPLN reported that so far the pandemic that has mortgage and utility assistance. Hispanic Nashvillians have received only 2% of those funds. Right, this is exactly where an equity lens would help, right? So on the front end, asking, how are we ensuring that the funds are distributed in a transparent and equitable way?
Well, one of the things that we found out in looking at what the logjam and the problem is we follow that same model. The United Way is the gatekeeper. Well, they get $1 million right off the top. They get 10% cover their admin. Well, I don't know how they've been working, but I do know that the more educated a person is, because there are people that cross all strata of economic resources who have struggled during COVID. Well, they're eligible for these funds too. But the unfortunateness is they're getting the lion's share of these funds just due to them knowing how to contact with people, knowing what to do. And there's not a way in which the city is really trying hard to let folk know who may not have access to computers, who find filling out an online form to be just totally hard, or to the immigrant community when English is not their first language. I mean, that it would be sad if this $6 million, because I just don't see how, because what they did last week was they held a meeting. Now they're soliciting nonprofit organizations to say, hey, fill out this form, ask us for some money so we can give you this money so you can try to get this people, so that you can try to get this money to the people who need it. Well, all nonprofits are not set up for that type of work. And, oh, by the way, it takes staff and people to be able to market it and to process people's claims quick enough. So this has just been a disaster because the city, again, back to the whole idea of a way of looking at public policy through the idea of equity becomes even more critical.
I just want to say I second everything Commissioner Zucker just said. I can already think of like a lot of folks, especially in the communities. Like I just think of all the folks who work at Tyson that live in Nashville that could like truly benefit from this, who didn't even know it existed. And so, I mean, I think we have firsthand people, and I'm sure all of us know somebody who's kind of in that boat or in that position, but just want to second everything Commissioner Tucker just said.
So what I'd like to hear from you is what kind of training or tool would you find helpful in educating others, including your council members and folks in your sort of universe, right? What would be helpful in educating them on what is an equity lens and how could it be used? What would you all think would be most useful?
I can start just, I think one thing that needs to be shown somehow, some way is these examples that we're talking about. Like we could talk about it theoretically all the time, but until they see or hear, like, Pratik used to work at Tyson and, his family got COVID and he had to go back because he doesn't have a job. Like until they hear those stories, nothing is going to move until you kind of put a face to it. And so I really believe that we need to do some exploration and some of that case study that needs to be in those educational materials for sure. I think that's impactful. And I also think that the powers of the city listen and the general public stand behind anything that has real people and real stories in it.
And to just add to what Commissioner Dash is saying, I saw a 8-point equity lens that talks about as you do policy. I think a comparison document or some PDF that shows how you currently go through policy decisions and here are the outcomes, and then being able to show, take the same policy issue, but run it through these 8 things, and it will show how the policy must come out shaped different. It comes out with a different implementation strategy. So to be able to show them, as Commissioner Dash said, here are the real examples of real people, but also here's how you've been doing what you do. How different would it be if you were forced into doing it like this? So whatever that might look like, some graphic person. I know that you did, Mel, you did a homeless piece once that really explained everything in a picture, kind of pointing arrow kind of thing, that when you really looked at it, you know, oh, okay, so that's how that works. Something like that, that I don't know how to do that. That's not in my skill set, but I know it when I see it. So something like that, I think, would possibly help.
Okay, great. And I do also want to mention that there are, there are folks in the community who have already paid some attention to this and are interested. I know that it's for the, for sorry, a voice, which is the sort of loose knit group that I've worked with Avi and Commissioner Venick. I know that there's a lot of interest at that table. That's a voice for the reduction of poverty. And so the folks who are at that table, where they also are at other nonprofits and policy settings. So I think that we would have some strong partners in the community to push it forward. But you're right. Like what I want to be able to give people kind of, right. So think about the housing brochures that we did. And, or the primers, right? That was in large part, to educate, but also to give people the language and the tools to be able to advocate for themselves and for better housing policies. So I think that that's the kind of thing we need to do for this.
And I agree, and I think Irwin ought to be heading that up. That's my personal opinion.
You're on deck, Irwin. Okay, well, I'll do some working with some community folks and circling back with Irwin and some others, and we start sketching out what document or some educational brochure would look like. And collecting the stories, you're absolutely right, Commissioner Dash, which is something that we also paid a lot of attention to when we were doing the housing, the affordable and fair housing primers, was telling the policy argument, but through the lens of like real people and real experiences.
Okay. If then it's left the director's report.
I feel like for the most part, I have told you all the important work that we're doing in the office. But I will share a written director's report and append that to the minutes for this meeting. So that report will be available to you all, but also to the community. But I know I heard from Commissioner Tucker on an issue that he wanted to raise. It's not on the agenda, so I don't necessarily think that we can take a vote on anything, but I think certainly for you is the issue, Commissioner Tucker, to start the conversation.
Thanks, Mel. MDHA is looking for a new director, and I would hope that we could weigh in as a commission to even kind of shape, just as we're trying to do in the selection of a new chief, that is a just as critical position as it is of picking a chief. The past decade with MDHA has been a nightmare. Envision Casey is behind. They have open units that people who were displaced are not able to get those units because they're not allocated for affordable housing. So I really think that this city needs an MDHA director who is sensitive to the housing crisis that exists in this city and will put forth policy initiatives to help to really help deal with that in a meaningful way. MDHA over the past 10 years has seen and appears to be more in line with the developers. MDHA, I believe, and I've held, has been an enabler of the gentrification that has happened within the urban core. If you're familiar, MDHA also handles the tax increment financing and all those other things that, again, if there was an equity lens attached to that, or if the force of the MDHA would be more about the affordable housing crisis than some of the other things. Over in Casey, they literally built a school next to a school, and it's been covered in the paper multiple times that they are unable to meet the debt on the school that they built. MDHA, to me, should have never approved building a school. That fell outside of their bailiwick. So I'm hopeful that if we can put together some information in kind of a quick time to put before us, that maybe we could issue a statement or a request that in the looking for a new MDHA executive director, that these things be taken into account. Thanks.
If I could jump in on that, I concur with what Commissioner Tucker said, and I would suggest that if we could, perhaps we might invite Bill Purcell, who I believe is chair of the MDHA board, to our next meeting to discuss with us concerns that Commissioner Tucker has raised and what the process is going to be for the selection of a new MDHA director and what public input is being solicited in that process.
I like that idea, and I'm wondering if there is a commissioner who has a personal relationship with Bill Purcell and would volunteer to do that invitation. If not, then I'm happy to extend that invitation to him.
I know Bill Purcell personally. I wouldn't say that we are close buddies, but we do recognize each other when we walk down the street and have engaged with each other personally over time. So I'd be happy to work with you on extending that invitation.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. I'll get with you tomorrow on that. And I'm sure our friend, Mr. Avi Poster, former commissioner, is on this call, as he is on most of our calls. He will be a assistance in that as well.
Any other, anything else, director's report?
That's all, Madam Chair.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll go to announcements. Actually, I've got two. Uh, Mayor Brian and me at the so prepare for the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. We decided a bit further and Hooper this month. That includes make that council permanent, which we took title of Mayor Council on Women and Gender Equity. The mayor seemed to embrace the idea, provided that funds don't come out of tax money. Of course, part of our recommendations were based on the inclusivics report that this commission did. And any council that would create or made permanent in the mayor's office would work clearly with this commission. Although this is merely focused on Title VI issues, a Women and Gender Equity Council would probably be a little bit more focused on Title VII, which would be consistent with the mission of this commission, and we would continue to work with that. And I don't know if I would be appointed to that or what overlap there would be, but I would certainly hope that there will be some overlap between that council and between this commission. Another announcement I have, of course, I guess I should have made at the beginning, of course, just to remember former member Iris Buell, who was passed away. She's been a supporter of this commission for a very, very long time. And she, even after she left this commission, she continued to be active in helping to raise understanding of the mission of this mission support work that's been done. It's a shout to for the just for Metro Nashville.
Yes, this is Commissioner Pretorius. I have something. I don't know, you guys can probably remember in the beginning when Mayor Cooper started his tenure, there was a rumor that he was going to downgrade the position for the New Americans office. And that, but now they've really he's changed his mind, and Muhammad Shukri Hassan has just been appointed as the new leader for the New Americans' office. And I mean, he's terrific, and so we are very glad to have him in that position. And the position is now again like it was in the past.
And thank you for raising that. And I was remiss not to tell you all that as well. Mohammed is a good friend of the commission. He has participated in many events. And, you know, I've had communication with him. And I really look forward to having such a great partner in the mayor's office in that position.
Any other? A motion to adjourn.
So moved. So moved. I'll
All in
second.
favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we
Thank you
are.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.